Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to today's IEEE USA Livestream webinar, Building a Retirement Plan. I'm your host, Jonathan Cho. This is the fourth and final webinar in our financial literacy series in partnership with IEEE member discounts. For the complete series, you can access them through the link we'll be providing in the live chat and comment sections shortly. IEEE USA's goal is to create programming that's valuable, relevant, and of interest to you. As such, we will be sending a short survey to all registrants after this event and would love your feedback. We value your opinions and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes and share your thoughts. Our presenter for today's webinar is Kyle Cunningham from Northwestern Mutual Wealth Management Company. Kyle is a wealth management advisor specializing in personal wealth management and retirement income planning. He's been in practice for 14 years, helping clients build and protect wealth using tax advantage investment and financial planning strategies, and is a wealth management and retirement income certified professional. Without further ado, I'll now pass it off to our presenter. Welcome back, Kyle. We're excited for what you have for our audience today.
Thank you kindly, Jonathan, and everyone at IEEE. It's a real pleasure to be back. We're here covering quite an important topic, retirement income planning. It's my pleasure to present really good insights and perspective here on how each of you can enhance your prospective retirement well-being. So, many moons ago, back in parents' or grandparents' time, pensions, Social Security, these income sources were the main ways in which you could fund retirement. And that meant that most of the retirement income planning was done by someone else. Our parents and forefathers were not required to worry about retirement like we are. And although there are still pensions, they're scarce, but there are still pensions and Social Security, the reality is we need to do so much more proactively to shore up an enjoyable long retirement. And when you're planning for retirement, it's easy to focus on saving as much as possible. That's great. Totally want to be saving during your working years. But when you're concentrating on getting to retirement, it's really easy to forget that once you're in retirement, you need to get through it. And how much money you need to save is only part of the planning. You need to figure out how to use the money that you've saved during retirement such that you can make the most of it, be confident, enjoy the golden years and a lengthy retirement, vacation. It's really worth planning for, is the point. It, as you'll see in a moment, can be complicated. Good question here is one of the first complicating factors. Do any of you imagine you might outlive your savings? Well, many people think so. Today, we're going to talk about retirement planning, but not so much about saving for retirement. Rather, we're going to focus on the second part of the equation that I mentioned earlier, the planning that you need to do to get you through retirement. So first, I'm going to help you understand the two phases of retirement planning and why the differences between them are so critical. And then we're going to talk about the 6 major risks of retirement. Lastly, I'll share 3 strategies for creating a sound, enjoyable retirement. That's the agenda today. Believe it or not, 67% of Americans think they will have a chance to outlive their savings. I'd imagine it might even be higher than that. So it's the case some of you here might have that same concern. I think after today's session, if you don't feel more confident about how you can become bulletproof in retirement, you will at least have a game plan to get there. So 67% of Americans think they might run out of money. That's a lot of people. I think more so now than ever, retirement is on the minds of Americans and globally, right? People are worried about how they're going to get along during a 3 or 4 decade vacation. With a down market today globally, it's top of mind for many. So how do we make sure you have the best shot at making your money last? Well, the first step is understanding that the strategies you've been using throughout your working years are very, very different from the strategies you'll leverage and employ during retirement. And that's because while you're working, you're in accumulation mode. And during retirement, we're in decumulation. We're actually withdrawing from all of the assets and wealth we've amassed over our working years. I think it might not sound that hard at first, but once we dive into it, you're going to see some of the complexities and the puzzle pieces that need to be put together so that we can make a big difference in how long your money lasts. So it used to be you could follow a very simple rule, the 4% rule, that was utilized generally by us, and that 4% of whatever wealth or savings you had, you could withdraw upon annually, and you could rest pretty well assured that you'd have enough to last. But today it's more challenging, and withdrawing a set amount is riskier. The volatility in the market makes things less certain, and we're living so much longer than previous generations, which means our money needs to last longer, and we need to start thinking more strategically. So how you withdraw from your wealth in many different buckets can make a big difference on your overall income and your overall happiness in retirement. Therefore, when you take money out of, say, a tax qualified account versus taking money out of a taxable account, like a traditional IRA or savings account, there could be a big impact on how long your money lasts. So let's talk about what changes when you move from that first phase to the other. One of the things that changes is your investing time horizon or time frame, which is the length of time in which you plan to invest before you'll anticipate taking withdrawals. So when you're saving for retirement, you have a pretty good handle on how long you'll be investing. For example, if you're 45, you plan to retire at 65, it's a 20-year period. But after that, it's a wild card, right? Time becomes a wild card. No one knows how long they'll actually live. You might live to 100, 105, right? That wild card means we need to think critically and strategically about longevity. While you're saving for retirement, you're generally trying to grow your savings as much as you can based on whatever your risk tolerance might be. Your asset allocation, the exposure to stocks, bonds, cash, and other investments, that is set up to help you with this. But after retiring, the asset allocation will likely be changing as well. You want to generate as much income as is possible during retirement from your savings, according to whatever your risk tolerance might be. So income is the driving force in your asset allocation strategy, and your retirement funds might not last as long as you need them to. So growth in your investments is still important in conjunction with creating income. There's a concept called sequence of returns that suggests when losses occur, when you actually realize downturns in the market, this can have a major impact on a retirement portfolio's likelihood of success. So having a down market in the years surrounding your retirement date can have a huge impact on how long your wealth lasts. The damage from the losses of the down market increases exponentially if you're taking withdrawals from your portfolio at the same time. It's like a double whammy. If the market's down and you're withdrawing, it can really negatively impact your well-being long-term. So let me show you an example that clearly defines sequence of returns risk. Let's say we've got a hypothetical investor named Meg who saved $500,000 in her retirement plan at work. So we're going to keep it simple. We'll say her portfolio was invested in a 50-50 asset allocation, 50% equity, 50% bonds. And let's say she decided to retire when she turned 60. After working with her advisor, she determined she could withdraw 5% per year adjusted for inflation from her portfolio. Her retirement date and the date she started spending from her retirement savings was January 1st of 1973. So we picked that date because 10 days after that day, on January 11th, now 1973, there was a big market downturn that started a 2-year bear market for stocks. Using historical returns from the period, we can see the market volatility's effect on Meg's retirement. Assuming she kept taking those 5% withdrawals like she had planned to, Meg's portfolio didn't last as long as she needed it to. You can see on the left with the yellow bar that she ran out of money by August 1994 when she was in her early 80s. That is way too early to run out of money. But what if the sequence of returns was flipped? What if instead of a down market starting upon retiring in 1973, it didn't start until much, much later? We'll take a look at the chart on the right with the blue line. If the high returns from 1994 had happened first, and the low returns from 1973 had happened last, Meg's portfolio would have increased substantially over time, creating a marked, drastic difference between the examples here. The example on the right, where we just flipped the sequence of the actual historical returns from that time period in the 70s up until 94, we saw a tripling in value. And note, that's still assuming that Meg takes the 5% withdrawals that she had planned to. Why is there such a difference? Well, let's talk about the 6 key risks you face when planning for retirement. You might have thought about some of these already, but when you're in retirement, their impact on your financial security does change. And it also affects you in many, many ways and in different circumstances. And that's why when I'm working with clients, I spend a lot of time making sure retirement income planning is done, addressing each of the risks. Here is an overview of all of them. And then we're going to get into more depth explaining in detail each of these 6 risks. So we've got market risk, longevity risk, long-term care, healthcare risk, leaving a legacy as a risk, and inflation and taxes. These are all very, very noteworthy hurdles, obstacles, or risks, whatever you want to call them, that every retiree needs to consider. I believe this to be extremely important here. So let's dive into, firstly, market risk. Mainly, no one can predict when market downturns will hit or how long they will last. And these down markets can affect your retirement savings, your income, your confidence and happiness through retirement. And as we just saw with Meg's example, there's also the possibility that the timing of a market downturn can have a very drastic effect on how long your money lasts. In fact, the closer you are to retirement, the greater the impact market risk may have on your plans. And that's because the older you are, the less time you'll have to recover if and when we know they always will, markets tumble. The tumble or downturn does yield to an advance ultimately, but we don't know when that downturn or bear market will happen. And that was what I really wanted to hone in on as we looked at the sequence of returns risk in Meg's example a few slides back. So market risk will always be there. You cannot totally avoid it, but you can lessen the impact of this on your retirement savings. One of the most important steps you can take to lessen market risk and its negative detrimental impact on your well-being during retirement is making sure your asset allocation and your risk profile are very appropriate for you uniquely with your investments. And that means as you move through life, gradually adjusting your asset allocation or your mix of investments. Said differently, the exposure that you have to equities versus, say, fixed income. And another way to address market risk is to pay for essential expenses that you know you'll have, no matter what or when in retirement, with money that's not tied directly to the stock market. For example, using Social Security or pension income to cover your essential expenses. This will help ensure that your needs are always met regardless of market conditions. Lastly, you could put a cash reserve in place, like a separate bucket with enough money in it to fund up to about 2 years of living expenses, not covered by your guaranteed income streams. The cash reserve can provide liquidity and easy access to money during a prospective downturn. And by having the money set aside for basic living expenses, it'll help you having to sell during prospective market downturns in the future. You never want to sell low if you can do without. So there's another retirement risk that we covered already. This is longevity. In the United States, a man who turns 65 has a 50% chance of living beyond 88, and a woman has a 50% chance of living beyond 90. So if you're married, there's a 50% chance that you or your spouse will live beyond 94. With medical advances and longevity being so critical for us as prospective retirees and those in retirement, we can imagine we might live longer in retirement than we did during our working years. And that's great, but it creates a big challenge. And it's important for us to understand how long we need to plan for. So make sure your plan's going the distance and takes into account the likelihood that you very well may live into your 90s and maybe longer. There are tools to help you manage longevity risk. Let's get into those. When it comes to meeting expenses in retirement, most people look to their guaranteed income sources. Again, pension, Social Security, and annuity income. These promise to pay some benefits for as long as you're alive. And that monthly benefit, even though it's reliable, it generally isn't enough. And when you decide to start taking Social Security, that is also another factor, right? Because you can start before your full retirement age or even postpone it beyond FRA or full retirement age and get bump ups in your Social Security income for the remainder of retirement. So you need to weigh a lot of options as we're considering longevity. But those reliable fixed income sources are definitely going to help. But there are fewer and fewer pensions that we see. And if you're lucky enough to have one, you should rely upon that, make some smart decisions with the pension election, and then consider annuities because they can be a great solution to longevity risk. They're one of the few investment vehicles that provide a guaranteed income for life. And that can really help improve the odds that your portfolio will survive as long as you do. Another risk here, taxes and inflation. Inflation has remained relatively low in recent years up until about a year or so ago, once we were in recovery of COVID, it's skyrocketed, right? And everyone has felt the impact of inflation on our financial picture. It has a really big impact. And let's look at an example here. So after 15 years, at a 4% annual inflation rate, the purchasing power of 100 grand is down to 56,000. If we say that differently or look at it in a different lens, it'll take 100 grand a year to support your lifestyle at 65, and it would take almost 200,000 a year to support that exact same lifestyle at age 80. So it is the case our expenses are going up because of inflation's impact on our purchasing power. One strategy to mitigate inflation is to keep some stock exposure in your portfolio and help protect your spending power in retirement. Stocks have historically provided growth that is necessary to keep pace with inflation. You could also delay Social Security. I alluded to that earlier. The longer you wait to take Social Security, the larger the income will be. And that's a great way to hedge inflation. There are also some annuity tools that you can design with inflation hedges built in. So there's a lot of good stuff as we try to mitigate this risk of inflation. And now I want to talk about taxation as being probably the largest expense any retiree will have. It nips away at your retirement savings. And, that's really, really critical. So the money you've been socking away in tax deferred accounts, think 401k or other employer sponsored plans, that money in its entirety is taxable when you withdraw it. And for example, so would money be in a traditional IRA. So all that money that you might have built up in traditional IRA and 401k accounts, that's not all your money, right? So much of that is the tax man's based on whatever ordinary income tax rate you fall into. And because it is subject to those ordinary income taxes, you might end up with meaningfully less cash flow than you'd expect. And it would make it difficult for you to meet your day-to-day expenses and could potentially push you into higher tax brackets annually, making the issue even more troubling. So as a solution to tax planning, we do planning. As a solution to tax detriment, we do planning. And in this case, I think the planning ought to become very relevant to the entire retirement picture. And many retirees have a number of different taxable accounts, tax deferred accounts like 401ks, traditional IRAs, and they've got tax-free accounts like Roth IRAs. And choosing which accounts to tap into and when makes a huge difference in your experience through retirement and how long your retirement funds will last. There's no set answer, to be clear. It really depends on your unique specific situation as to when to tap which assets. And in some cases, it might make sense to even do a conversion by taking a portion of your tax deferred accounts and converting them into tax-free accounts. That would be considered a Roth conversion. And you'll have to pay income taxes on the amount converted, to be clear. But with some careful analytical planning, we can make sure as advisors, our clients are taking advantage of this strategy to drive efficiency from a tax perspective in not only their retirement, but also the legacy element of their financial planning. You could also use cash value from a permanent life insurance policy to help fund part of retirement. That's a very, very tax strategic way to derive income. You can do it through withdrawals or loans on the life insurance contract, and not only moderate and have control over your tax bracket year in and year out, but you might also help long-term as we think about longevity and legacy planning. Okay, fourth risk in retirement planning is healthcare. We're living longer, medical advances are really supporting that, but those advances come with costs, and they're always increasing. And when we combine that with fewer employer-sponsored health plans for retirees and limited government benefits, the medical expenses become a huge concern for most retirees. And of course, there is Medicare if you're over 65, but that's not the magic bullet that you might imagine or hope that it is. The fact is, medical coverage is hard to come by, and it isn't free. And most people pay a premium for Part B of Medicare. So you'll need to factor all of that into your costs through retirement, because the medical costs are what we would consider to be essential expenses, right? Just like, property taxes, food, and the like. So how do we deal with the issue of healthcare risk in retirement? Well, before you choose a Medicare plan, make sure you understand what you're getting. Talk to a professional, right? Pay attention to the deductibles, co-pays, co-insurance, out-of-pocket limits, all that stuff. What network your physicians might be in. Compare your options, and then whatever plan you select, ensure that there's like a participating pharmacy that meets your needs. Now, just as important as all those factors are, might be including the healthcare costs as part of your budget. I mentioned that earlier, just the same way you would housing, food, clothing, cell phone bills, and the like. The amount you budget for medical should include enough to cover premiums, co-payments, and all those other medical expenses like over-the-counter meds, dental costs, eyeglass or vision care, hearing aids. All that kind of becomes more and more prevalent and important as we age. So add and factor that into your retirement budget, and that way you can be sure you have enough set aside to meet those prospective expenses. So as high health care costs continue to increase, those costs do not take into account the cost associated with a prolonged illness or injury that isn't covered by private health insurance or Medicare. The cost of providing that kind of care, long-term care, that is potentially devastating to your well-being in retirement. Long-term care becomes important when you need help with bathing, dressing, eating, taking your meds. Like the normal stuff that we're used to being able to do independently can become a challenge, and we might need care and help with those aspects of our day-to-day lives. Think about it. What if someone needed to step in your life and help out? Would it be a wife, a child, or some loved one? How would that affect their lives and the loved ones in their families? Think through that. It's prospectively really, really challenging. And a long-term care event can not only create financial issues, but a really serious emotional toll on those loved ones that get involved. I mean, especially if someone has to quit working or move to a different state to help with a loved one's care. That's why this is such a key risk to consider when planning for retirement. The costs of care are getting larger and larger annually, and they're really seriously detrimental. The cost in 2019, a few years ago, for a home health care professional was over $74,000 a year. That's if you're getting care in your home. Obviously, if you're in a facility, a nursing care, getting skilled care, it's way, way higher. We're talking about, well over 150 grand a year. So many of you here today or listening at some point in the future might have experience with a loved one needing care and might have become very well aware of the high cost of that care. Depending on where you get your care, it can range, but we're talking about 6 figures in an expense that could potentially double if both spouses that are retired lose their independence and need help with day-to-day lifestyle. Now, the last risk I want to talk about here is your ability to leave a legacy. The desire to leave a legacy is at risk in that we may not have enough to sustain our own well-being in retirement. And if we had a goal to leave something behind to others, there would be nothing left in that unfavorable circumstance. So all of the risks we already addressed today sort of compound against the legacy objective that you or loved ones might have. So think about what legacy means to you: leaving money to kids, grandkids, leaving money for education, or leaving money to charities or causes that you're passionate about. You don't want to plan for this goal with the same money that you need to use to fund your own retirement. If you do, obviously, as I just said, you run the risk of not being able to leave a financial legacy at all. And whenever I'm working with clients on legacy planning, I often ask them to think about how they'll feel at, say, age 85 or 90. Think about your kids, grandkids, your college or nonprofits that you volunteer with, and then think, what do you want to leave them, right? If you're 85 or 90, like what do you want for your loved ones and your interests? How do you want to be remembered? What's important for you? And, if we think about that early on, we can become more closely aligned with balancing, retiring comfortably and enjoying the golden years and also leaving that legacy. So we want to plan for it as early as is possible. And what I think is really, really interesting, like this is one of my most favorite slides, is, if you plan a vacation, I have recently, just this year, I went on vacation, and I know we were shopping for our flights, hotels, spent a lot of time coordinating the trip that was only 4 nights. What if we were to think about that side by side with retirement, right? Because we did a 4-night vacation, but retirement might be 4 decades. So it's so critical to think about spending adequate time, proper amount of time that's needed towards retirement, just as you might planning for a vacation and airfare and hotels and the experience. There are a lot of people who spend more time planning for vacations than they do retirement. But the longest vacation of your life is likely to be retirement. So put the time in. You need to really plan for it and make the most of your money so that it lasts as long as you do, and you still have the opportunity to leave something behind if that's important for you. So with everything we talked about, you can see why retirement income planning isn't boiled down to a single number, and why we don't have blanket recommendations for the clients we serve. It's not solved with a single product or approach. Retirement planning is unique to the individual we're serving, and you need to think about it as an evolving journey, a lifelong, ever-changing process that takes a lot of time, thought, planning, and ongoing review. So if you're thinking about retirement, you might go, okay, well, this is helpful, but where do I actually get started? So now we're going to talk about the 3 strategies to help you start your planning. First, you're going to want to create income for life. Remember, early on, I suggested during our working years, we're in accumulation mode. During retirement, we're in decumulation. We're withdrawing, right? Income is center stage for retirees. So after a lifetime of saving and investing, the goal becomes living the lifestyle you want and ensuring that your money lasts as long as you live. So to make that happen and really try to bulletproof your retirement, put it on paper, create a budget, literally write down your expenses and think about how you do that. And starting, write down what you want out of retirement, whether it's moving to a sunny state down south or traveling to see family annually or downsizing your home or whatever's important, and put numbers around each of your ideal visions and your retirement goals. And the numbers are a big deal, because if you don't know what you're saving for, then you can't know if you're on the right track. So to make your retirement goal a reality, you got to be very specific. And a good strategy for creating a budget is to just divide your expenses into 2 buckets: essential expenses, the must-have essentials, And then the discretionary expenses, think the nice to have stuff, vacations and the like. So creating an income for life can be done via paying into Social Security, leveraging a pension if you have one, designing an annuity, right? These are some great ways to have lifelong income. And most retirees rely on multiple sources of retirement income. The key is to identify which of them you can count on, and then the ones that you can really rely upon, you want to pair with your essential expenses. So remember, when you're doing your budgeting and you break out what's a must-have expense and what's a nice-to-have expense, you want to make sure that you're logical and sensible here and aligning your predictable lifetime income from Social Security, pension, and annuities with your essential expenses. And then you can leverage your other assets for whatever's discretionary thereafter. Because once your critical must-have expenses are covered, retirement becomes so much more enjoyable. You have far less worry and anxiety because you know for sure the must-have costs are already taken care of by those guaranteed lifetime income payments. So if you've done all this and you've developed a budget, you've identified your expenses, when to line up your must-have expenses, your critical expenses with your guaranteed income sources, then you can really start to look at the other income sources from investment and real estate and the like to see where you would withdraw from. And this is a graphic here to help you visualize your options. At the top, you can see your pre-retirement income. That's the money you're earning during your working years. You know, hopefully as part of your planning, you're putting part of that money into some or all of the 5 buckets you see here. The annuities, investments, IRAs, 401ks, Roth IRAs, and life insurance. Because these are all assets that in retirement can be converted to income. But there's an important point that none of these 5 can deliver income to you throughout retirement for as long as you live. That's not what these tools are for. And that's where the funds shown on the left really come into play, right? The income annuities, the Social Security, and the pension. So an effective planning strategy is combining both defensive and offensive approaches. And it's important to strike an appropriate balance between these. That's why strategy number 2 here, protecting your assets, is so important. Before you retire, you're going to want to protect against events that could interfere with your ability to earn income to fund a plan. Think about an accident or a disability. You could get insurance, long-term disability insurance, to help cover your income if you end up becoming sickly or injured. And you know, it happens more often than you might think. Life does throw curveballs, and if you don't have a way to cover those lost wages, you might end up tapping into your retirement savings early and negatively impacting your retirement then. So we talked about long-term care events being one of the big retirement risks, and including funding for long-term care as part of your retirement planning can help protect your savings and your independence and you know, flat out your retirement enjoyment as well. Let's talk about what we can do after we protect your retirement and move on to goals like leaving a legacy. It's common for this to become more important and a bigger part of the discussions we have with clients as you're getting older. This becomes more relevant, right? So unfortunately, when you're starting to think about leaving something behind when you're gone, it's usually about the same time you start getting concerned about running out of money in retirement. So one solution is to include permanent life insurance in your planning. Most people buy life insurance to protect their families if they die. And that's a great reason to do it. But there are other uses and ways life insurance can be strategically integrated into your retirement plan. You know, permanent life insurance has many benefits. It builds cash value, which can be used to help with your retirement expenses, as I mentioned earlier. It's super tax efficient and can fund a legacy. It immediately assures a death benefit that's higher than whatever you put in, payable to your beneficiary. And that's very tax favored money in a lump sum, which would help with legacy planning for sure. Now, it used to be that you'd make a lot of assumptions during retirement income planning. You would decide on your retirement age. It would be the case you decide on your expenses and assume they might increase with inflation. And then you'd assume a portfolio return. And that was it. You would determine the safe withdrawal figure, which I mentioned earlier was historically 4%. That's what retirees were doing. But it's so different today. It's so much more complicated. Retirement can be twice or three times as long as it once was for our predecessors. So here at our firm, our goal is to change the conversation around retirement income. We want to help you have the retirement you've been dreaming of, and we want you to be more confident that when you retire, your money will last as long as you do. So we talk about your dreams, what you want. We help you understand where you stand today. Then we apply statistical modeling via our financial planning software to deliver solid, balanced solutions designed uniquely for you to provide financially secure retirements. And the point of all the statistical modeling and testing that we do is to make sure that we can identify the financial plans that give you the highest level of confidence about your financial preparedness and security during the retirement years. We calculate the scenarios to a 90% probability of success because we want to take out all the guesswork. We want to ensure you're bulletproof in retirement with at least a 90% or greater probability of income. And we want you to know that you can relax, enjoy your well-earned time in the golden years, and know your money's going to last for your entire lifetime. So look, we covered a lot of ground today. As we wrap up here, I want to just reiterate, we talked about how your planning strategies change when you switch from accumulation and saving for retirement to decumulation and withdrawing in and through retirement. That's when you're spending the money. We talked about the 6 big risks to your safety. And we talked about strategies to create financial security in retirement. We didn't get into everything, obviously, here on our talk. But we got to do a lot of the important stuff. And this hopefully has boosted some confidence in your own minds as to how to help your money last long term. The process of planning for retirement income is incredibly important. It's complicated. And the earlier you start, the better. It's not something you'll want to do alone. Find someone you trust. Find a good firm who really recognizes all these nuances of retirement, and make sure that the firm and advisor that you work with gives you a unique plan developed analytically and carefully for you that suits your unique circumstances so that you can get the most out of your retirement. I really enjoyed this talk here today, and I'll tell you, I'm going to make a few minutes here for questions. I know we covered a lot, and maybe there's some info you guys would like beyond just what I talked on thus far.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Kyle. So folks, while we wait for Kyle to transition back to StreamYard, we'll open up the floor for questions. Please post them in the live chat and comment section, and we'll add them to the stream for Kyle to answer. So Kyle, here's our first question from our audience member. Mark asks, if you do a Roth conversion, do you pay taxes at your current tax rate based on current income, or is there a special rate?
Okay, let's see. If you do a Roth conversion, do you pay taxes at your current tax rate based on current income? Yes, that's correct. You would pay, in the year in which you do the conversion, you would pay an ordinary income tax on the amount you converted from Roth to a traditional account.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thanks for the question, Mark. So real quick, I do see some folks asking if this webinar will be recorded. Yes, it will be recorded and will be available on our channels along with the rest of our the webinars in our financial literacy series. So we've included the link at the bottom. So the next question, Dave asks, is there a way to compensate for the required minimum distribution in an IRA account?
Well, you're mandated at, depending on your age and your date of birth, it's about 72 now, to withdraw from your IRA and 401k money via an RMD. That's short for required minimum distribution. Whether you want to or not, whether you need the income or not, the IRS mandates that you actually withdraw a specific percentage annually. And the reality is that you're unable to plan for exactly what the RMDs will be annually because it's based upon the value of your portfolio and your age. And since the portfolio is variable likely with market movement, you can only have a guesstimate as to what the RMDs might be each year moving forward. But we have the tools, and any advisor would be able to help give you at least some clarity on what it might look like.
Thanks for the question, Dave. This next question, do you recommend long-term care insurance? If not, how can you handle this?
Great question. I do recommend long-term care insurance. I have it myself. I bring it up with clients that I serve. I've seen personally the detrimental impact of self-funding long-term care costs. So I love the idea of insuring against that risk, at least in part. The reality is it's really hard to get. The insurers of the world that are still partaking in the long-term care industry and providing coverage, they are very well aware that their claims experience is going to be less favorable now and in the future than it ever has been because we're living longer and because of medical advances. We're seeing a higher number of folks need long-term care, and we're seeing that the long-term care events are lasting longer than they ever have. So it's so critical to have a plan. If you can't get long-term care insurance, then the idea would be to self-insure, and you would actually want to earmark wealth in a specific account for prospective long-term care expenses. You actually have to separate money from other dollars that you might use for normal income because of the high likelihood that you, or if you're married, you and potentially your spouse would need care at some point down the line.
Great. Thanks, Kyle. And thank you for the question. Jonathan asks, any good reference sources for tax planning?
You can go to irs.gov and you can get a lot. I honestly don't have the ability to make any good references or referrals. But, short of that, I would say align with a qualified accountant or CPA, someone who's got experience, because it's complicated.
For sure. Hope that answers your question. Amy asks, if I have to withdraw from an IRA for an RMD during a down market, how can I compensate for the loss in RMD withdrawal?
Well, the reality is we know distributions must occur from qualified investment accounts like IRA, 401k accounts. And we know from historical experience, it's very likely there will be market downturns in the future. So with that knowledge, it's important for us to have a balance in your approach holistically, such that not every single dollar is invested, say, in the stock market, which is prone to downturns. So I think the way that we would help is in making sure we balance your asset allocation appropriately so as to mitigate the prospect of selling low in a down market.
Thanks for the question, Amy. So Kyle, Stephanie asks, would a conservative planner use the 5% inflation factor before or when planning, or something higher? Or would using something more than 5% be unrealistic?
Yeah, I think I understand the question. The reality is there's no one with a crystal ball. So we really don't know what we can forecast inflation to be. We know historically what it's been. And I think it's safe to assume on the low end 3 and up to 5 and even maybe higher if you want to be conservative. It's personal preference because, again, my crystal ball is broken and no one has one. We don't know where inflation will be. What I would suggest is that you run financial planning analyses looking at how secure your plan is if we see 3% inflation? Then run another scenario. How secure are you if inflation goes up to 5 or 7% or higher? And then you'll start to glean clarity from review of those financial planning simulations.
Great. Thanks for the insight. Stephanie also asks, is an annuity advised for someone who manages their own savings well? The annuity doesn't appear to add value for such a person.
Yeah, the reason annuities are so helpful in retirement planning, well, there's many reasons. Even if you can manage your own wealth and savings well, it doesn't mean that you have clarity on how long you'll live, right? The only way you can ensure lifetime for as long as you live for sure is via a tool like an annuity. Not only does the annuity provide guaranteed lifetime income, the annuity will help you endure down markets such that you're not reliant exclusively upon investments for income. Because remember, we know historically markets turn down. So good planning would suggest that instead of taking an investments only approach, we balance that with a portion into an annuity such that at least a portion of the income we need is coming on a guaranteed basis, regardless of what the value of the stock market looks like.
Fantastic. Thank you. Our audience member Larry asks, besides Roth conversions, are there any other ways to reduce or avoid the RMD tax bomb?
That's somewhat of a tough to answer question. The Roth conversion might very well help. Definitely consult a tax and financial advisor prior to doing so. There are other ways in which you can reduce taxes through retirement and create better outcomes and optimize your experience. So in addition to Roth conversions, you can liquidate your tax inefficient assets first, leveraging non-qualified assets for income early and allowing your tax favored assets to compound and grow for later usage down the line. That might be one example.
Great. Hope that answers your question, Larry, and thanks for the question. This next question, almost all online planners have suggested assuming an annual growth rate for investment for planning purposes. Should this number be less than the average of the last 10 years of market index growth rate?
Good question. I really like this one. My commentary here would be sort of like on that inflation question, like when we're doing retirement planning, what should we assume inflation to be going forward? Well, since we don't know, test your planning with good software, which is easily accessible in today's world. Test your planning to see how secure you are in varying inflationary environments in the future. And also test how secure your financial planning is in retirement with differing return rate assumptions in the future. So rather than just hanging your hat on one rate of return assumption and saying, okay, I'm on track or I'm not, use multiple and do different simulations and make sure that you have a balanced, diversified approach such that the entirety of your income derivation is not tied to a varying rate of return, right? That's what we've been getting at here in having a cash reserve, having an annuity or pension-like income, and also using asset allocation to ensure the entirety of your investments aren't solely in the stock market.
Great. Thanks, Kyle. Our audience member Steve asks, how should we choose a financial advisor?
I really appreciate that question. I've been trying to become a better choice for prospective clients for a decade and a half now. So it hits home. The reality is the more experience you have, the better. But there's a fine line because you don't want to hire the advisor with the grayest hair because maybe they're going to retire soon, right? So I think making sure that your advisor will be with you long-term and or assuming and ensuring that your advisor has a succession plan, someone to take over smoothly thereafter if there is a retirement. So experience, longevity, making sure that you can stay with a firm through retirement, and then making sure that the advisor is someone you trust, someone who's responsive, timely, accessible, and credentialed. So I have some specific credentials that designate me as a specialist in retirement income planning and personal wealth management. Those are some of the ideal credentials that you want your advisor to have when we're talking about retirement planning. They're really well educated folks with those credentials that have a lot of experience and training with retirement specifically and investing.
And folks, with that being said, reminder that our presenter is Kyle Cunningham from Northwestern Mutual. So, if you have any questions, be sure to reach out, get consultation. Um, Christopher asks, is an HSA something to factor into your retirement plan, even though it can be used during your working years?
Yeah, absolutely. Every asset that you might have is something that you would want to consider for retirement, unless it's money you anticipate depleting before retiring. So the short answer is yes, be it an HSA or a Roth IRA or stock or equity in your company, whatever it might be. We always want to factor those assets into your planning long term. And John, I want to thank you for suggesting again that I'm Kyle Cunningham with Northwestern Mutual Wealth Management. I love my work. I'm passionate about this. I take retirement planning very, very seriously. I've served clients in the pre-retirement and retirement stages for a very long while now. It would be my pleasure to connect with any and all of you off base. So don't hesitate to reach out if you wanted to schedule a consult, a quick call or meeting in which I can tell you our approach in more detail and ask some questions to see if I have any good feedback for you uniquely.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kyle. So folks, we are almost at the end of the hour. We'll get to as many questions as we can before then. This next question, Zachary asks, is there any risk of Social Security running out in the future?
Absolutely. If you look at headlines, there are studies testing longevity of Social Security payments. And I saw something actually just quite recently that, if I recall correctly, suggested there would be a real challenge for Social Security payments come as early as 2033. So depending on the way in which you're analyzing Social Security, you might arrive at different prospective dates, but the idea is there might need to be a reduction in payout as compared to what retirees have enjoyed historically.
Fantastic. Thank you. This next question, Alan asks, do you have any comments around a dividend-focused stock portfolio and or REIT investments?
I do. Real estate investment trusts are really nice ways for you to add layers of diversification to your planning. Real estate's been a very high-performing asset class, and although it's had its struggles, I'll tell you that volatility it really does drive good performance. So we like to see a sliver allocated to REITs, and dividend paying stocks are great. So certainly an allocation to those types of assets in combination with other assets will create even more diversification. Striking the right exposure to the different asset classes is going to be key for any investor.
Fantastic. Thank you. And so, folks, unfortunately, we are out of time. I know we couldn't get to everyone's questions. We appreciate all the interest shown. I have just provided Kyle Cunningham's contact information through the Northwestern Mutual website. So be sure to reach out to him if you have any questions. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us today and for providing our audience your insight on preparing for retirement and building an effective plan.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a real pleasure. And I look forward to connecting with everybody at some point again. Thanks for having me.
We absolutely loved you. And thank you to our audience members for tuning in and for your great questions as well. We hoped you enjoyed and learned a lot from our financial literacy series and will join us for our upcoming webinars in the future. The complete series has been archived in our channels for on-demand access at any time. You can also access the same one through the same link you received earlier. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channels on social media and check back daily for future live stream updates. Have a great day, everyone.